So if you happen to have a wall, you could always put your legs at the wall if you wanted to. Otherwise, I tend to recommend being flat on the back, and then we'll take our feet together and our knees wide once we get there. If you happen to have a couple of blocks or a couple of books or cushions or pillows or rolled up blankets, you could use them outside the hips and they would support you a great deal. And for those of you that want blocks and you don't have any, I have an order coming in soon and I ordered lots of extra ones. Plus I have lots just hanging around at home right now, so if you want to borrow them until this is all over and we can practice in a regular environment, then just let me know. Anywho, come down onto your back nice and slow. And if you don't mind muting your video or your audio, that would be fantastic. That way everyone will be able to hear me and not the ambient sounds that are going on in all of our respective homes. Once you come onto your back, take the feet together and the knees wide. Think about pressing the soles of the feet together firmly, lengthening inner groins to inner knees, drawing outer knees toward outer hips. You want to try to notice, is one hip sinking to the floor more than the other? Is one ankle going toward the floor more than the other? Take your mind to those ankle bones. Is one falling to the floor more than the other? See if you can find symmetry in the ankles and in the hips. Try to lengthen the pubic bone away from the navel. Think of lengthening hip bones away from armpits equally. And again, thinking equal weight distribution on both sides of pelvis. Think of pulling femurs toward hip sockets and squeezing outer trochanter's. If you're in a more flexible body, got any hypermobility going on, that's a great option. Let your arms rest heavy beside you, palms facing up, arms closer to you to fill less, arms higher to shoulder, closer to shoulder's height to fill more. Taking your attention to your abdomen. With each inhale, feel the abdomen expanding. Not only feeling the breath move into the front of the body, but equally towards the sides and the back body as well. With each exhalation, feel the abdomen contracting, lungs emptying. And I highly recommend, if you haven't tried it before and you have something handy, putting something on the abdomen as you continue to breathe here. It gives the lungs a little bit of pressure to resist against, will make your lung tissue that much more strong, that much more flexible, and that much more able to, be really healthy. And that's what we need right now, is to be able to have very, very strong lungs, very, very strong mind. Let's take 10 more breaths here. Abdomen filling, abdomen emptying. Perfect. And remember, your hands can be wherever you like. You can change the position anytime you fancy. They can be beside you, they can be on your body. Returning to the natural breathing. You can choose to continue resting the arms beside you. You can choose to continue having the knees wide, or you can change the position. If you find it's too much at any point, you're not used to it, you bring your knees together, you walk those feet apart. And you can squeeze the knees and thighs to touch and pull those ankles apart. Or if you happen to have a block or a book or something, you can put that between your thighs if you like and have something to squeeze. Very useful, again, if you're in a more flexible body versus stiff body. Let's reach our fingers towards the ceiling regardless. Remember, you can rest your arms. That's also a great option. Right hand comes to left elbow, left hand to your right, squeezing opposite elbows with fingers and palms as we pull those elbows apart. You want to create resistance here. There's a lot of pulling apart. We're not just letting those elbows relax, but there's a lot of resistance so that we can engage every muscle of the shoulder and upper back, including every single digit. Elbows lift away from you, upper arm bones sink to floor. Shoulder push-ups, elbows lift to ceiling, upper arm bones sink to floor. Elbows lifting, elbows sinking. Try to move the humerus bone, the upper arm bone, as much as you can to you, away from you. And finding extension, no tension, take those elbows into some circles. Gradually grow the rotation until it's as large as you like. Don't worry about how big the size of the circle is. Focus on the resistance of the elbows away from one another. The squeezing of every digit, especially little finger and ring finger. Changing direction now. You can increase or decrease the range at any time. You can allow the arms to be heavy beside you if you don't need a shoulder release today. You just want to rest the arms. Always want to give ourselves a lot more space to do what feels good, to do what feels right, whenever there's more external stress. And then from there, take the elbows toward the legs, toward overhead, toward legs, toward overhead. Only going into a range that feels good. Remember to continue to squeeze the knees and thighs together or the soles of the feet together, depending on which leg position you're choosing. Continue to pull the elbows apart. Continue to squeeze with fingers and palms. Think of the rib cage as well. If your rib cage tends to move here, think of those front ribs drawing together and rooting down. And this will help give you more stability in the spine. Good. And then going toward overhead and holding there. Maybe you take your forearms to the forehead. Maybe you go over the crown of the head and you hover or you rest. Perhaps you're somewhere in between. Hovering doesn't quite feel right. You need a little height. You can put a book or a block or whatever you've got handy underneath those forearms. It'll give you quite a good in-between amount of sensation. You can also cross the arms in front of you. You could rest them beside you, changing the position whenever you like. Attention goes to the rib cage. With each inhale, imagine the rib cage as an accordion that could expand out to the sides, up into space, toward the back body. With each exhalation, feel the rib cage contract, lungs emptying. Continuously focusing on the movement of the rib cage, the movement of the lungs within the space of the rib cage. More rounds of breath. Returning to the natural breath. Bring those elbows in front of you. Lengthen the arms towards the ceiling. Go ahead and rest the arms heavy beside you. Then check in with the legs. If the knees are still wide, chances are good you'll be ready to draw them together. You can always revisit knees wide and feet together if you fancy it. You can straighten the legs whenever you like. Otherwise, we're going to take our knees together and walk the feet apart, outer edges of feet parallel if you haven't gone there yet. Lengthening pubic bone away from you, tilting pelvis away from you, squeezing knees and thighs together as you pull the ankles apart. Reaching fingers towards ceiling or allowing arms to rest beside you, lengthening from shoulder to elbow to wrist to fingertip. And then a left hand to your right elbow, right hand to left, pulling opposite elbows apart as you squeeze with fingers and palms. Try to use every digit the same amount. Elbows lift to ceiling, upper arm bones sink to floor, continuing at a pace that feels good. If you want to feel more still, think outer upper arm toward the end of the mat, inner upper arm toward overhead. Think of the ribcage dropping towards the floor, maybe even the back ribcage lengthening as you do so. And that would look like this. You'd root into the skull, you'd lift the back ribs as you root them to the root the front ribs down and then lift the ribs away from the pelvis if you needed more space there. And then finding extension, no tension, you can take those elbows into circles. Eventually changing direction. Continuing to find that resistance. Knees and thighs squeezing together. Ankles pulling apart, lifting the arches of the feet perhaps. Inner heel, outer heel. Big toe mound, baby toe mound. Equal pressure. Once you've gone both ways with your circles, elbows towards the legs, toward overhead. Going for a range that suits how you feel today. Coming toward overhead to hold. Maybe you come to your forehead, maybe you come over the crown and hover, rest on the floor, rest on a block or a book, whatever you've got handy. Arms can be beside you, arms can be crossed in front of you. You've got many, many options and you can change your position whenever you like. Big inhale to fill the lungs, full exhalation to empty every last drop of air. And then inhaling to fill the abdomen. When the abdomen is full, breath spills to the rib cage. When the rib cage is full, breath spills to the upper chest and shoulders. And then we empty the lungs from top to bottom, continuing with a wave of breath up and down the spine. At any time, alter your position if where you are right now does not suit you. Remember, you can add height under the head or cushioning under the pelvis, support outside those hips, anytime. Ten more waves of breath up and down the spine. With your next exhalation, return to the natural breath. No longer modifying the breathing in any way at all. Walk the knees and ankles together. Draw one knee in and the other toward your chest. Take your hands to your shins. You could interlace your fingers over the shins or behind the thighs. You could use a strap over the shin. If you happen to have one handy and have your elbows on the ground. You can use anything you got though. It doesn't need to be a yoga strap. And then go side to side, lengthening the lower back. Hip creases lengthening away from armpits. Think an outer shoulder to floor, inner upper arm toward the ceiling. Knees, thighs, ankles squeeze together as we try to spread our toes apart. Lengthening pubic bone from navel if that makes sense to you. Start to make circles next. Go ahead and change direction now. If your fingers are interlaced, you can swap the interlacing. If it's not relevant, not to worry. How we hold our legs in this position is not important. As long as it does not create pain, it is correct. Change direction. And going side to side if you haven't yet. And coming back to center, take one hand to each knee, knees away from you, away from one another, toward one another, stirring the hips up a little. You can do this allowing the pelvis to move back and forth, or you can place your palms on the ground and try to resist the pelvis moving, trying to keep the rib cage and the pelvis very still. Both are good ways to do the same thing. You can decide based on how this feels. If you haven't been doing a lot of yoga, I would let the lower back go back and forth, imprint and arch. It feels lovely. If you feel like you need more stability in the hips, you're more mobile there, keeping the pelvis very still and trying to move only the femurs, that'll serve you better. It really depends. You can always try both. Change direction now if you haven't yet. Keeping those ribs still if you're bendy there. Otherwise, allow as much movement as feels good. Maybe you can spread your toes a little more. 5 more circles. Make them as big or as small as you fancy. And ceasing the circles. Let's bring our feet to the floor. We're going to roll to our right side and stay there. All right, so for this movement or this action, you can have a variety of options for your right arm. You can have your elbow bent and your hand at the base of the skull like I'm showing right now. You can have, this one would be even more comfy as it were. You could have a block or a pillow underneath the head and have the right arm extended in front of you. Palm could be down or up. I think down is more comfortable, but you might find the opposite to be true. If you want one heck of a shoulder stretch, you can straighten your arm, palm facing down or up. I like palm facing down, and rest your ear on your upper arm. So all of these work. You can change your mind whenever you like, right? If you go for one of these options where the head is up a bit more, you want to make sure the neck is really comfortable and your head is in line with your spine. You don't want your pelvis further forward or your skull further forward than the pelvis. You want a 90-degree angle at the knee. Knees are nice and bent, heels close to the buttocks. Left hand is on the left hip for balance, or if you want to be a little tricky, or you can have your hand in front of you. If you're on the fingertips, you want to think of reaching with the elbow and lengthening the spine as much as you can. Not letting your shoulders crowd your ears, but finding lots of space for the neck, regardless of which option you choose for your arm. I like to bend my fingers and pull them towards me a little bit in order to find even more lift in the fingers and strength there. And then from here, you're going to keep the inner edges of the feet touching. Your feet can hover, or they can be on, the outer edge can be on the floor. Both are fine. You're going to lift the left knee up, lower the left knee down. You're going to go right up and straight down. Inner edges of the feet stay touching, and you're not letting the left hip go back. So I don't let my left hip go back as far as it can. I keep those hips stacking. So it's a relatively small movement. I think of lengthening the left inner groin to the left inner knee, drawing the left outer knee to the outer hip as I go up. And I think of squeezing the inner groins as I come down. I try to spread the toes broadly. I think of lengthening hips away from armpits and vice versa. I'm drawing my abdomen and my ribs toward my spine. And if you happen to have it, you could have your pelvis, your spine against a wall. That's a great way to make sure you're not cheating. Another way would be to put a block at the tallest height behind your pelvis. And that would look like this. And then if I were to lift too high, I would just knock that guy over. And if I keep my pelvis neutral, I won't knock the block over at all. So that's the idea. Let's see if we can do 5 more, lifting and lowering. And then lifting up and holding up. You could stay still, you could pulse, or you can just hang out. Think about the buttocks pressing forward as you lengthen the inner groin. I imagine that I'm squeezing my outer hips, my trochanter's towards one another. So I'm somewhat contracting the buttocks a bit, or the glutes, right? Try to keep the inner heels, big toe mounds level. Pardon me. And if that right arm is straight, push into the palm and imagine you could lift the right ribs towards the left. I like to literally lift them from the floor, but it's a lot of work. It's almost like a side plank, but it's incredibly good for strengthening the core. Just something to think about if you're on the more flexible side or you tend to have a bit of pain in your back or your hips. Good, and then go ahead and rest. Take the feet a little farther away from you. Now, again, we're trying to keep the pelvis still. We'll lift the left leg. And what we want to work on is just moving at the hip, right? So we're moving at the thigh bone. We're trying to draw circles with the left femur. But again, we're not letting the left hip go back, right? We're not going as big as we can. We're keeping that left hip very, very still. And we're trying to isolate the movement to the left femur, left thigh bone. Everything else stays the same. Abdomen and ribs are firmly contributing to the effort. And you can always have a block behind you or a wall behind you if you want to ensure that you're not moving into that pelvis even more. I like to start with internal rotation, but you can do whatever you prefer. Let's go the other direction now. And remember, you can take rests anytime you like. And I like to lift the outer right heel slightly. Keep spreading your toes. And remember, left hand can be in front of you. Left hand can be on your left hip if you want more challenge or less. Thinking a very strong elbow here. Great for making our fingers very strong as well. You'll never meet a jar that you cannot open or a radiator cap you can't open. That happened to me once. I couldn't open a jar and I was very, very upset about it, so I worked on my finger strength. Hasn't happened since. We've got 3 more to go. But you can rest sooner, allow yourself breaks anytime. Or smaller circles too. Even the tiniest circle will provide a great deal of effort and fatigue if you do enough of it with precision. Good, and then stack the legs, take a brief rest. All right, and this next one you can do in a couple of different ways. I'll show you a few different angles of it as well. So we straighten out our legs, and we're looking not to have kind of a banana shape with our body, but rather a straight line. So we're more of a ruler, or a human ruler, rather than a human banana. Your left hand can be in front of you, again, for balance, like an outrigger elbow, or your hand can be on your left hip. For this one, you're going to bend the left knee, and one of 2 options. Either your foot comes in front of you, and this is either comfortable or not. It might be, it might not be. If it is, fine. If it isn't, don't worry about it. Either you clasp your ankle, or your hands are on the floor, or your hand is on your hip. Second option, foot behind right thigh. All right, and I'll show you from another angle. You start straight, and then you bend your left knee. Either foot comes in front of right thigh, like so. You can clasp the ankle or not. Or your foot comes behind your thigh. One will be more comfortable than another. Try both, see which one you prefer. If neither of them feels good, which is possible, if that's the case, then you'll do it with stacked legs. All right, and you'll lift and lower the top leg. Otherwise, you're gonna try to lift and lower the bottom leg, going up and going down. Whether your right foot is behind you, or behind your thigh, or in front of your thigh, doesn't matter. Either way, same concept. You're drawing your abdomen and your ribs toward your spine, maybe away from the floor a little, concentrating on one spot. And I like to spread my toes and flex my left, or in this case, my right ankle, as I go up and down. Concentrate on your breathing. Use your fingers. Either holding ankle, pressing into floor, whatever you're working on. And then eventually see if you can lift and hold up. Try to lift as much as you can without any pain. And then you have a few options. You can either stay still, you can pulse, or you can draw zeros, you can draw circles. If you go for the circles, you want to do the same number in each direction. I just have to get my power cord for my computer. I will be one moment. Circles, make sure you go both ways, make sure you're even, pardon me, and then when you're ready to let yourself rest and flip over to the other side. Great, and then once you're on the opposite side, again, select a position for the arm that suits you. You can have your elbow bent. You can have your arm straight in front of you and a pillow of some sort underneath your head. Or you can have your arm straight and your ear resting on your arm. All of these work. It's up to you which one suits you more right now. And you can change your mind whenever you like. First movement, you're going to take your thighs closer to you. You've got a 90-degree angle at the hip. Your heels are close to your buttocks. Right hand can be on your hip or it can be in front of you. You've got an outrigger elbow if it's in front of you. Your fingers are pulling towards the palm. There's a little bend in the knuckles. I'm going to lift the right knee and lower the right knee. Or whatever side's opposite for you. You might have ended up on the opposite side. Not to worry. Doesn't matter as long as you do both. You can hover the foot that's closest to the floor, or it can touch the floor. You're drawing abdomen and ribs to the spine, and maybe even drawing the ribs away from the floor a little bit, or thinking about it. Lengthening hips away from armpits, not letting the hip come toward your shoulder, but lengthening it away. And this sort of work is fantastic if you have one side of the body that's stronger than the other, particularly in terms of the back and core and glutes. And then holding up, you can stay still, you can pulse. Thinking about taking the buttocks forward as you lengthen the inner groin of the top leg. Remember, you can always have something behind you. A higher height block would work well. Having your pelvis and your spine against a wall is also a really good way to do this series. Try to spread your toes. Think lengthening inner groin to inner knee toward outer hip. Outer trochanter's are firing. Send that top hip forward. Don't let the top hip go back. If your hips are not burning, then that means you're not neutral. Relax. Well done. All right, now we'll do the next one. Take your feet a little farther away from you. You want a 90-degree angle knee, 90-degree angle hip. And then you're gonna lift up that top leg and start to draw circles. And again, you're not letting that top pelvis go back. You're keeping the pelvis very, very neutral. Trying to isolate this movement to that femur, to that thigh bone. Trying not to allow the pelvis to move. Trying not to allow the torso to move. Try to notice, is that top hip going back and forth? Think symmetry. Think stillness in the pelvis. Only moving that right thigh. Only moving in that one area. Creating stability in the rest of the pelvis. Spread your toes, flexed ankles if possible. Lower abdomen toward lower back, and changing direction. Remembering you can always change direction sooner. You can do 5 circles in each direction, 10, 15, 20, whatever suited you. Especially if you were doing a recorded version of this class. You can always pause and do a little more, a little less, based on how you're feeling that day. And don't be surprised if one side is a completely different experience than the other. Over time, if you keep working on it, it'll change. Three more. Good. And then give yourself a rest. Now we're going to look at the last of the 3 movements we're going to do today, on our side that is. So you're straightening out. You don't want to have a banana shape with your body. You want to be more of a human ruler. So your legs are going a little further back than you think, so you can just see your feet when you're straightening out the legs. And then we have a couple of options. We're going to bend our top knee, either place our foot in front of the leg that's straight or behind. So your top leg either goes in front or behind, whatever suits you more. You can try either and see which one feels better. It'll be pretty clear, I'm sure. You can hold the ankle, you can have your hand on the ground. If the foot is behind you, I recommend the hand in front of you for balance. And then from here, you're gonna lift the bottom leg up and down, whether the right foot or the top leg is in front of you or behind you, not important. Think of drawing ribs and abdomen toward your spine. Spread your toes. And go just slightly slower than you want to. I'd say 50% slower than you want to is always a good bet. And that way you'll focus that much more on the smaller alignments, smaller muscle groups that you need to support yourself. And eventually holding up, and then you have options. You can stay still, you can pulse, you can draw circles. If you're drawing circles, make sure you do the same number in each direction. So say aim for 3 and 3, or 5 and 5, or 10 and 10, or whatever the case may be. I also often like to point and flex the ankle here, or draw circles with the ankle here, especially if you've got any IT band concerns, or sciatic issues that come and go. Really, really nice, this one. And it doesn't matter if your foot's behind you or in front of you, same idea. Really lovely. And I think I'm squeezing my hips together a little bit as though I had a block. Anywho, when you decide it's enough, you'll go ahead and rest those legs, take a little moment. Then when you're ready, you're gonna go on your back. We're gonna do one little bridge pose. If you have a block, put it between your thighs. If you don't have a block, don't worry about it. If you have something you could use instead of a block, like a book, go for it. And what we're aiming for here is to spread our toes broadly. Our feet can be wider or closer, depending on what feels good. We don't want our toes to be turning out a great deal or to be turning in a great deal. We're looking for our knees and our feet to track. We lengthen the flesh of the buttocks away from us, so we don't want to tilt the pelvis away from us and bend into the lower back here. Rather, we lengthen flesh of the buttocks away from us. We create length and space in the lower back. And then we think outer shoulder to floor, inner upper arm to ceiling, and we lift the spine one disc at a time. And I recommend coming in and out a few times if you'd like, and then coming up to hold. Or if it feels lovely, you can come straight in and hold up. Another option is to bend your elbows and to point your fingers to the ceiling. You can do this with spread fingers, fists, fingers straightened together. Lots of possibilities. Some of you might like looping a strap over the shin, holding the strap with each hand, and then coming up. If you're looking for more shoulder opening, that is a nice possibility too. I really like it. It mimics holding the ankle, the shoulder the shoulder release that you get when you find that ankle. Try to take 10 more rounds of breath. Focus on one spot with your eyes. If your mind wanders, bring your attention back to the movement of your breathing. If you don't have a block that you can literally squeeze, imagine you've got one. You're squeezing it, you're equally trying to drop it. You're dropping the ribs and abdomen, you're lifting the pelvis. You're dropping the outer shoulder to lift the inner upper arm. Take up to 10 more breaths. And remember, if you started to feel your knees, try the feet a little farther away from you. That'll usually take the pressure out. Adding something between the thighs will usually take the pressure out as well. If taking the knees a little farther away from you doesn't do it, try that. You can always go a bit wider too. When you come out, try to lower as slowly as you can. One disc, one vertebra at a time. Upper back, mid back, lower back. Once you're all the way out, you put your block beside you if you have one, and then you can straighten out your legs. You can hug your legs. You can have your knees bent and go side to side. Those would all be good options after a back bend. When you've sufficiently released your back, bend your knees, roll off to one side, come onto hands and knees. And you can have your hands literally on the floor if that suits your body. Hands farther forward of the shoulder will reduce the pressure in the wrist. Hands closer to shoulder will increase the pressure in the wrist. If you have blocks, you're welcome to wrap your fingers around them, like so that you've got a really good grip. If you wanted to lift your block off the floor, you could. So that's an option as well. You can certainly be on your elbows too. Tuck your toes, get a good grip. Think inner upper arm forward, outer upper arm back, and then pull those elbows apart. Round your back, tuck your chin, press the floor away. Lift the gaze, lift the sit bones, look up. Spine rounding, chin tucking, pressing floor away. Gaze lifting, sit bones lifting, looking up. Try to draw the abdomen and the ribs toward the spine, especially if you're in a more bendy body. And you can remove or add support under the hands whenever you like. You could wrap your hands around books too if you didn't have yoga blocks. And then neutral spine, point your feet, drag the heels away from you. Think about dragging the heels not as much as you possibly can away from you, but let's say 60%. Depends on the person though. And then from here, our objective is to keep our feet still and isolate the movement to the hips. We try not to let our ankles wobble to and fro. We maintain as much stability in the ankle as we can. This makes the knees happy and stretches into the hips more effectively too. Think about having a neutral neck, not lifting the chin, not tucking the chin, but right in the middle. Go the other way with your circles. And then stopping with your circles, tuck your toes, get a good grip, bring your hips towards your heels. And then you have options. You can stack a block under your head or a book or whatever you've got handy. You can stack your fists or your palms under your head. You can straighten your arms. Trying to lift the inner upper arm. Pull the elbows apart as you push into the palms. If you need more, you can lift your knees. There's no pain allowed if you lift your knees, just not worth it. Train the puppy before you jump into dog, as it were. Take your time. One version is not better than another. Whatever you choose to do, make sure it feels good. If it doesn't feel good, or at least is, moderately comfortable, question why you're doing it. And see if less might suit you more. Concentrate on your breathing. Feel the back of the body expanding as you breathe in. The back of the body contracting as you breathe out. If you lift your knees, think of lengthening hip creases away from armpits. Bending the knees as much as you like. You can separate the feet wider if you want less sensation. You can bring the feet closer together should you want more. Trying to lift your toes will increase what you feel a lot. Take 10 more breaths. Concentrate on the breathing. And when you're ready to, we'll change positions. If the knees are up, bring them down. And then big toes are touching, feet are pointed, your hips come toward your heels. You can stretch out the knees and ankles any amount at any time. And then support your head. You can use a block under the head at whatever height you like. Try a few options until you see what feels best. You can stack your fists or your palms underneath your forehead. You can extend your arms, resting the head on the floor perhaps. If this felt really good and you wanted more of a shoulder stretch, you could pop up onto the fingertips, try to roll the inner upper arm toward the ceiling, the outer upper arm toward the floor, like so. And this would increase what you felt significantly if that was something you needed. Again, take your mind to the back of the body, feel it expand, feel it contract. And just a top tip, if you were to get any cramping in the ankles or the shins or feet, roll up a blanket like so, and then put it underneath your ankles like this. And it will change everything. It'll feel really comfortable again. So remember that that's an option. And you can even use, say, a rolled up extra yoga mat or any kind of blanket or towel. They would all work in a similar way. Great if you got any kind of plantar fasciitis symptoms happening too. 10 more breaths. Back of the body expanding, contracting. Good, and then come forward onto hands and knees. Stretch the toes. Take the right toes farther than the heel. Heel farther than toes. And then baby toe edge of foot slides away. You can bend your knee a little to feel more if you want. Don't go into the knee. And then left foot, slide the left toes farther away than the heel. Hips level if possible. Heel farther than toes. And then grabbing baby toe edge of foot, slide it away. Maybe bend the knee to add more, maybe don't. And then release it. So from here, if you have blocks, you can use them. If you don't have blocks, I will show you what to do. You can wrap your fingers around them. The higher the height of the block, the more support you're going to get. You can step forward between the blocks with the right foot for a lunge. If you don't have blocks, you can either, I would take your right hand, bring it in a little, and then step on the outside. You can be up on your fingers, your fists, your palms, kind of in between. I kind of call this a chicken foot hand because I can't think of a better way to describe it. So that's yet another way to have the hands. I like fingertips because then you're strengthening your fingertips, which is nice. Anywho, blocks, hands, whatever you want is great. You can have your right leg on the outside of the right arm and shoulder, or it can be on the inside, right? Both are good. One is not better. They feel different, honestly. If your right leg is on the outside of the right shoulder, it's going to increase the hip opening. So it will create more external rotation in the hip if your knee and your foot are pointing out a bit versus pointing forward. So you're automatically going to have a little more space in the hip. It'll be a little more comfortable, likely. There's a good chance you'll feel a bit more stretched too, but it'll likely be a little more comfortable too. Depends on the person though. You want to make sure your knee and your foot are tracking the same way if you choose that option. Same goes with forward. If the knee and foot are tracking forward, you don't want the knee pointing out and the foot pointing forward. You want as much symmetry as you can get there. So pick and choose as you like, whatever you prefer. Left knee walks back as far as you like. You can lift the left knee from the floor, or you can keep your left knee on the ground. I don't mind either way. You can bend your knee or keep it bent, or you can lift it up and lift the hips a bit more too. It's up to you. Chest lifts, abdomen lifts. Use your blocks or not, as much as you like. If you are using blocks, make sure you're wrapping your fingers around them and you're squeezing them. If you want this to be harder, you can always slide your foot a little farther back. So you can see now my heel and my toe mound are stacked on top of one another versus my toes being closer to me than my heel. So that's just another way to make it, a little more tricky on you, or a little more stability for the joints if that's what you need. Let's see if we can take about 10 more breaths here. Right hip, right femur drawing back, down and in. Regardless of which position you choose. Left femur drawing forward, up and in, toward the hip socket. Fix your gaze. Try to resist the urge to fidget. Breathing. Lungs expanding, lungs contracting. Oh, and lately I like to play around with my right foot while I'm at it. So I like to lift up my heel, or lift up my toes, or go back and forth, things like that. Or maybe both. It's possible, but it's a bit awkward. But it's fun to play with. Good. Just a few more deep breaths. Try to lengthen the ribcage away from the pelvis if that makes sense to you. Squeezing the hips towards one another. Now when you're ready, you're going to lower that left knee, send the hips back, take the right leg back, and we'll bring the left foot forward. So you might bring your foot on the outside of your hands. You might have blocks, then you can step through, or you can step on the outside. If you choose to step on the outside and keep your foot on the outside, foot and knee tracking the same direction, somewhat 45-degree angle from the spine-ish. Depends on your hips. or knee and foot tracking forward. Both are great options. Blocks are great. Fingers on floor or fists, whatever you like is great, as long as you're not going into pain. Right knee lifts if that suits you. It does not have to. Left hip, you want to draw it back, down, and in. Whether hands are up on height or hands are on floor. We're not letting the left hip sink either. You can see that's the tendency. The hip wants to sink toward the floor. In this case, right hip actually. So we're lifting that right hip higher in order to find the hip bones equal distance from the floor. Just in case some of you aren't doing the same side, just focus on whichever hip is closer to the floor. In this case, whichever leg is back, chances are that hip is dropping. Try to lift it up as you draw the front hip back and down. Good. Let's see if we can take 10 more breaths. Concentrate on one spot. And if you want more, you can always try to stack the toe and the heel and the back foot there, if you like. Lungs filling, lungs emptying. Oh, and I forgot, if you played with lifting the left heel, left toe, sole of foot, that sort of thing, on the other side, feel free to do that on this side if you want to. And then if you're using blocks, coming onto that height, lowering the knee, sending the hip back, the foot back. And let's take a rest. So we can choose to have a more, active rest versus passive rest. So you can either take a child's pose, supporting your forehead with a block or your hands or the floor. Or if you have a couple blocks, you can put them beside one another. If you don't have blocks, you could use a book. Or you can take your hands to interlace, or you can place your palms on the ground. Measuring the elbows so that they're as wide as your shoulders, and then either palms on floor, palms squeezing a block or two, or a book or two. And then here, we're looking to round the upper back. So just like that angry kitty back, lift the abdomen, lift the ribs, not letting the lower back bend here, but lifting in the opposite direction. Thinking inner upper arm forward, outer upper arm back, lengthening the neck, and then sliding forward and sliding back with the shoulders. That'd be one option. Another option would be shoulder push-ups, or knee lifts, or knees up, forward and back. One or all of those is great. Pick and choose as you like. Allowing yourself a rest anytime you like, if you're not in a proper rest already. Let's take 10 more breaths, moving or being still. Elbows squeezing towards one another as the wrists pull apart if you're on the elbows. Good, and then when you're ready, let's come forward onto hands and knees once more. We can use blocks or we can use the floor. I'll show you both. This time we're going to arrive with the knee on the floor and keep the knee on the floor. So the right foot can come forward between the blocks. The right foot can come forward on the right side of the blocks. Or you can have your fingers, your palms, your fists on the floor to take the right foot on the outside. Maybe keep it on the outside, maybe scoot it on the inside. Depends on what suits you. You can change your mind whenever you like. There's no particular, best way to do a lunge. What you're looking for is no knee pain and as much of a neutral pelvis as possible. Well, no pain anywhere, really. If you need more, you walk your left knee back farther. So keep in mind, the closer the knees are, the less you're going to feel. The farther back you walk that left knee, the more you're gonna feel. It becomes closer and closer to a split type shape, really. So we want to be mindful of our inner groins and make sure what we're doing feels good. So walk your knee back to the extent that suits you, do not force. And then back foot, see if you can drag that heel away from you. Just like we did when we were on our hands and knees, back heel drags, and then you see if you can keep a bit of a lift there. Not as much as you possibly can, but a comfortable amount. You can keep your hands on your blocks or on the floor. You can bring your hands up to your thigh if you like. You can bring your hands to your hips and squeeze your elbows. Lots of options. If your hands are on your knee, it's nice to interlace and reach with the elbows a little bit. And I'll show you that in another position. Hands could be on blocks, any height you like. Hands could be on thigh. Interlacing, reaching elbows, maybe hands on hips. Make sure whatever you do not feel your left knee. If you do, you fold your mat over. Right? Give yourself extra padding. If that doesn't do it, add more still. Give yourself extra height underneath that knee. And if you are in Victoria and you want a foamy, I have a whole stack of them I can lend you. Just let me know. But a rolled up blanket, all sorts of options are great. You can even tuck the toes of the back foot if you prefer, that's fine too. But that pointed foot is really, really great. Upward dog foot, we often call it. And if the elbows or your hands are on your hips, think of squeezing the elbows towards one another and lengthening the rib cage. Lengthening the sternum. Lifting the lower abdomen, lifting the ribs. And you can certainly play with lifting that right heel if you like, or lifting the toes if you like, if you want. It will be a little tricky. Let's take 5 more deep breaths. And then when you're ready, lowering your hands to the floor, to blocks, whatever you got. Hips go back, foot goes back. And then we'll bring the opposite foot forward. Either through with no blocks, either stepping forward at whatever height of block you've got handy. You can step on the inside of the block. You can step on the outside. You can step on the inside of the hands or the outside. Change it once you're up to you. Walk that right knee back as much as feels good. Remembering the further apart you take your knees in this position, the more you're going to feel. Go as far back as feels nice. Change your mind whenever you like, and then see if you can find that drag of the heel, that lift of the ankle. And you don't want to go as high as you can, but just like say 60% of what you could do so that you have something to press into. So we want to be pushing into our foot so much so that the knee, there's barely any pressure on the joint. From here, if we need more, we can come up to whatever height we like with our hands. Maybe our hands are on our knee or our thigh. We can interlace our fingers or stack our palms and reach with the elbows and the chest, lifting the abdomen away from the thigh. You can see this is when I kind of let my hips sink and I just kind of am loosey-goosey. And then this is when I pull my femurs in and I lift my abdomen and my ribs. So it gives me more, it literally makes me taller and it makes me more stable too. Here I can just be pushed right over like a leaf in the breeze. And here I'm really stable and strong. If your hands are on your hips, you're thinking of squeezing with each and every digit, especially little finger and ring finger, and your elbows are squeezing towards one another as you lift the armpit chest. Pulling collarbones apart, perhaps.
Make sure you've got something beneath that knee so you do not feel it. If you do this work regularly, the knee will become stronger and stronger and stronger. The kneecap itself will become denser. The bone itself will become denser. And you will no longer feel anything in your knee over time. It just takes consistent work in the same direction. You know, I'd say like 2-3 times a week doing a lunge in this position with as much support as you need, reducing that support over time, assuming the knee gets the same exposure to this type of work. It will become stronger. You know, our bones are kind of like diamonds. You apply some pressure, or like carbon, if you apply some pressure, you get some diamonds. All right, and then hands come down. Tuck your toes, send the hips back, bring the foot back, whatever height of block or hands on ground, doesn't matter. And then we're gonna take a rest. Again, you can take I'll give you 3 options this time. So either a child's pose rest, head supported, knees wide, feet pointed. Or you can do the forearm core work, where you're on the elbows, you've measured those elbows, they're as wide as your shoulders, you're squeezing your blocks with your palms, or your palms are on the floor, you're squeezing a book, or you've interlaced your hands. And then you slide forward and back, elbow push-ups, lots of options. You can do this with the knees up too if you fancy it, or go up and down with the knees. Third option, feet together, knees wide, elbows wrapping, clasping, opposite fist. So this would be your third option. Feet together, knees wide, heels close to buttocks, wrapping elbows around knees, clasping left fist with right hand, and then drawing the palms and forearms to you as you press the knees out and lengthen the spine. Forehead rooting forward, back of the skull rooting back, regardless of which one you pick. Lift the lower abdomen, the ribs, if you're doing the forward and back movement. Focus on the back of the body, expanding and contracting if you are still. Good. And then from here, I'm going to give you a couple of options. Option 1 will be for anyone that's got any knee or back pain and they think a pigeon shape would not suit them today. So I'll show you both and you can choose whichever one you like. All right. So option 1 would be to come onto the back, take your ankle to your knee on one side, stretch out the arms, hang out here, ankle to knee. And then if you wanted to pull it in or use a block, you could. If you wanted to take it into a little bit of a twist, you could. And you could support yourself with a block, more or less. All right? If pigeon sounds appealing, and I'll demonstrate it so that you remember if you're not familiar. Knees and ankles at hips distance. Right knee comes forward toward right wrist. The foot is either directly behind your knee or your foot comes in front of the left thigh. And then we walk the left thigh back, left knee back. We can point our foot and hang out here. Walking the knee back. Or what I highly recommend is lifting the left knee with the toes tucked and trying to hang out on the fingertips. Lifting the abdomen, lifting the ribcage. So this is an option. Resting flat on the floor is an option, right? Or that first option that I showed you, ankle to knee on the back. So these are all good possibilities. Think right femur back, left femur forward. If you're in a pigeon. Deep breaths. Let's take 10 more breaths regardless of what we're up to. Lifting abdomen, lifting ribs. And you can lower that left thigh anytime if you fatigue. You point your foot, you hang out. You can stay, you can come to your elbows. You could rest a block under your head or your fists under your head. Feeling free to change that position anytime you need. You can stay up on the palms or the fingers the whole time if you like. And if you're on your back, no forcing, no straining, only go to a depth that feels good. Maintaining flexion in that right ankle is crucial if you're on your back. If you're in the pigeon shape, I tend to have the right ankle more pointed than flexed in this variation. Now when you're ready to exit, you're going to do so really slowly. And you can stay for another few breaths if you fancy it, but I want to show you how to come out right now in case you need to. You'd tuck your back toes, you'd walk your hands a little forward, you'd walk the left knee forward gradually, or whichever knee is back, you'd walk it forward gradually. Once you're quite close, you take the right leg, right shin, take it back, open up the back of the leg, stretch the heel, stretch the toes. If you were on your back, you'd swap which ankle was at which knee. If you'd come into a twist, you'd gradually exit that prior to coming out, of course. All right, so from here, if you're on your back, opposite ankle, opposite knee, pull it in, twist as you like. Otherwise, on the shins, you'll draw the left knee toward the left wrist. Your foot either stays directly behind your knee. So if you're more cautious of the knee, you want to do less there, that's the way to start. You can hang out right here. You don't even need to go further. If you want more, your foot goes in front of the right thigh, the foot is pointed, and you walk that right knee back a little. Again, the further back you go, the more you're going to be stretching the groins and hips. So only go as far back as feels good. Be moderate. I highly recommend lifting that right knee up, lifting the hips a little bit, kicking into the shin, and rising onto the fingertips if you can. This will build a lot more strength. It'll also build flexibility. You get both. Concentrate on one spot. And you can bend your elbows a bit, go a bit wider if you like, or you can keep your hands a little closer together. And you can always be flat on the palm too. That would be a lot more comfortable, a lot easier. Let's take up to 10 more breaths. Remember, it is okay to rest the right thigh anytime you need. If you're in the pigeon option. You can certainly flatten the thigh and rest the foot anytime. You can rest on your elbows anytime, or stack with this and rest the head too. Good, and when you're ready, we're going to exit. I like to bring my hands a bit further forward. Walk that right knee forward. If you're on your back, you swap sides gradually. And then take the left leg back. Open up the back of the leg. Stretch the toes and the heel. Oh. Sorry, I lost you guys for a sec there. There we go. Great. And then once we've come out of our pigeon, we'll stretch our toes. We'll stretch our heels. We'll do so on both sides. If we're on our back, we're gonna come onto the seat, and then we're all gonna bring the soles of the feet together and the knees wide once you come onto the buttocks. Now you can use a couple of blocks outside your hips or not, depending on how it feels. My feet are a little further away from my pelvis than usual, but you can certainly have them closer if you like. But I'm looking for more of a 90-degree angle at the knee. And then from here, hands behind you, chest lifting, abdomen lifting. You can stay. You can bring your right hand to your right knee or your right hand to your left knee. Your left hand can come farther behind as you twist towards your left. Elbows pull apart, looking to your left if you need more still. Try to lift the abdomen, the armpit, chest. Pull those elbows apart. Soles of feet push together firmly. And unwinding. Left hand to left knee, right hand behind you. You can twist from here, or you can bring your left hand all the way over to the right knee, lengthening as you twist to the right. Elbows pull apart. Fix your gaze beside or behind you. Equal weight in both hips. Equal pressure in both feet. And unwinding. We're gonna look at one more twist. Draw the knees together, straighten out your legs, and then bend just the right knee. So I'll give you 2 twists. This is option 1, all right? This is the milder twist, easier on the knees, easier on the hips. Left hand to right knee, right hand behind you, lift and lengthen, twist towards the right. Fix your gaze. This is a great position to hang out in. Elbows are pulling apart. You could even pull with the forearm if you wanted. If you wanted more, you would bend both knees. Then you would tuck right foot under, left foot over, push into the feet, right hand to knee, left hand behind, lengthen. Maybe you twist here, maybe you take your arm outside your knee. And then look to your left. Fix your gaze, breathing. So A or B, whatever you prefer, both are great options. Whatever you choose, make sure it does not create any pain. If it does, choose the first instead of the second. Ten more breaths. Don't force the depth. It is not important how far you twist. Whatever portion of the feet are touching the floor, press into them. Lengthen the spine any amount you can. Very gradually exit your posture, take your hands behind you, beside you, releasing one leg and then the other, straighten them out. Take the fingertips a bit behind you, point and flex your ankles. Lift the armpit, chest, lift the abdomen, draw some circles with your ankles. Try to keep your knees very, very still, just moving the feet. And if I moved my knees, I could go massive with my circles, but then my knees wouldn't become stronger and more stable. So it's much more preferable to keep those knees still. Go the other way if you can. Great. And then flexing, curling, pointing, flipping. Once more. Good. All right, let's do the other side. So we either bend just the left knee, right hand to knee, left hand behind, lengthening as we twist to the left. Or we bend both knees, tucking left leg under, right leg over. Left foot pointed, right foot more flexed. Lengthen, left hand to knee, right hand behind, twisting towards that right side. And I think of the left abdomen twisting toward the right here, or vice versa if you're going the other way. Elbows can pull apart, or you can take the left arm outside the right thigh. Fix your gaze, pull those elbows apart, press into the sit bones and the feet. Only twisting as far as feels good. If it does not feel good, try doing 50% less and then see how that feels. Adding more if and when it feels good. We always want a moderate effort when we're practicing asanas or postures. Sthira Sukha Asanam. Equal proportion of effort and ease. Concentrate on the movement of the lungs, 10 more breaths. Focus on the back of the body, expanding, contracting. Make adjustments at any time. And when you are ready, we're going to exit slowly, releasing one leg and then the other, extending the legs, taking the fingertips beside you or behind you, pointing and flexing the ankles. Let's go for 3 rounds, and then pointing 4 circles, drawing O's with the toes. Going the other way. And flexing the feet, curling the toes, pointing the feet, flipping the toes. And then go ahead and relax. All right, so from here, we're gonna take either Shavasana or legs up the wall. So if legs up the wall is incredibly comfortable for you, then it's a great option. If it's not incredibly comfortable, not a good option. I'll talk you through some legs up the wall if you are going to go there, and then I'll talk you through Shavasana as well with all my favorite alignments. So if you're gonna take legs up the wall, you wanna bring the left hip close to the wall. As close as feels good, don't force. Your knees are bent. You'd roll onto your back, keeping the knees bent. You'd straighten your legs partially, and then check out your spine. Usually you can lengthen the ribcage and the skull away from the spine a little. You can tilt the pelvis towards the wall. Make sure that your head and your tailbone are in line with one another, you're straight, and then let your legs straighten as much as you like. Releasing the arms beside you. I like to have my feet a bit apart, keep a little bit of engagement in the legs, but for the most part, I let my legs relax. I might even allow a little external rotation. And if there's any kind of lifting in the chin here, not a good place for Shavasana. All right? My favorite Shavasana alignments. So as you come down, you want to have the knees and thighs squeezing, and as you lower, you lengthen your spine. One disc, one vertebra. Try to lower slowly as you can, stretching out the spine as you go. And then before you straighten your legs, I like to flex my feet and slide my heels away from me, rolling the baby toe edges of the feet toward the floor. And this will help to release the hips more effectively. It's really nice, and it'll keep your pelvis more neutral as well. Extending the arms, wrists in line with waist, lengthening the neck, finding a little tuck of the chin if you feel any lifting happening in the skull. You can always put support under the head here. You can always put support under the knees. I'm a big fan of clenching or squeezing and relaxing the palms and fingers a few times as well. You might want to do this with the toes also. And then let the body become as still as it can be. Resist the urge to fidget and adjust. Concentrate on your body, your breathing from the inside. Focusing on stillness.
Should your mind wander, bring your attention back to the stillness of the body, the movement of the lungs within the stillness of your body. And slowly beginning to deepen your breathing, waking the body from the inside, blinking the eyes, moving fingers and toes, stretching the arms toward overhead, letting the arms fall down heavy, bending your knees. If the legs are up the wall, give those legs a hug. Roll off to one side and push yourself up. Traditionally, we roll to our right. And then come up into any seated position you like. And I'll finish off our class with a traditional closing chant of my lineage. So it'll be Om Shanti 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 Hi, which means peace, 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 followed by Shri Guravi Namaha, which means that we're giving thanks to all the teachers that came before us and to ourselves as our own teachers. And I'll talk you through it. Big inhale, hands touching in Namaskara. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Inhale. Shri Guravi Namaha. Namaste, everybody. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Sending you lots of love and hugs, virtual hugs.
Thank you.
See you.
Laura.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's great to see your faces.
Great.
Bye.
Likewise. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, Mom. Bye, Liv. See you later. Bye, everyone.
Bye.